do some conceptual pricing, because most of our estimating is first cost, high level concept estimating. From a consulting engineer's perspective, we typically don't get involved doing the detailed assemblies and takeoffs. We're trying to, we got a clean sheet of paper wondering what this project might be. So we don't become estimating experts usually, and we oftentimes rely on contractors that we know who are estimating experts and have gotten to the point where, based on some early information about the project, the square footage, the size of the electrical service, the size of the generator, the number of floors, the number of transformers we might be thinking, they can really help us on a conceptual basis. But if we are at a point where we need to really try to come up with our own number, again, we probably haven't become skilled in the tools that you're getting introduced to. There's other tools out there. I don't know if you even mentioned that, but the RS Means is an estimating book that is more conceptual, more high level, more historical data. If I was to bid a job using RS Means, I'd lose the job every time because it's got a little bit of I think it's too conservative. But that's okay for us who we're trying to come up with conceptual prices for a project. If we're a little bit conservative, that's fine. So we may use something like the Means, where we may just kind of have a number there for a motor connection that kind of includes a lot of things that you would build by components. And it just may say for a 10-horse motor, it's X. And we don't get into the detailed finite breakout. So, I only mention that because I think it's great that you get exposed to estimating. You need to understand what's behind it, because all of our projects cost money. We have to meet schedules and budgets. But also, if you get into a consulting engineer's office, you'll probably approach estimating a little bit differently. So that you're, it's not completely new to you. I'll just mention that now. So. You want this open, or I can catch it?
Your door. Yeah, let's go down. One door.
So as part of the program, that the topic this morning that we wanted to talk about is project management. And just like estimating is a little bit different if you end up working for a contractor versus a consulting engineer, and even depending on which consulting engineer, project management also is somewhat unique. And your exposure to that, your ability to sort of do some presentation with these project presentations that have come up, I think are great opportunities to kind of get in front of folks and kind of address the nervousness that comes with that, and hone your skills in presenting your material. That's important as part of project management, dealing with people and dealing with projects and project schedules and project costs and project contracts. But just high level, and then I'll kind of walk through what I want to talk about this morning. But high level, a firm like ours, Machad Cooley Erickson, we approach project management. That's sort of the leaders of what it is that we do as a service that we provide. And the only thing we sell is time and design. And so it's our project managers that need to kind of lead that effort within our firm. So to become a project manager at Machad Cooley, where we're dealing with potentially very large projects, and we've had projects in the 80 to 100, 120 million dollar total project cost. So we're dealing with large projects. To be a seasoned project manager at Machad Cooley is maybe a more significant effort, but there's a different expectation. Some of our contractor friends, and again, depending on the size of the contractor friend, they may offer a project manager role to someone with very little experience, and they're dealing with their smaller short order projects, and they're no less a project manager. It's just a different skill set and a different expectation. So I mention that now, that project manager has a wide variety of what it can be, and one could be a project manager sooner in some firms or later in others, depending on what it means to be a project manager. So just as you're looking at your career, looking at the things you want to do, just kind of understanding that there are some differences. So that being said, again, I'm with a large consulting firm, so I'm going to talk a little about what life might be in a consulting engineering firm, and specifically a large firm like Machad Cooley Erickson. So we bring in folks from a 2-year design program, and quite honestly, Dunwoody is really the best in this area to train people and to get people prepared for an entry-level position in consulting engineering. And we call that first role a designer in training. And so a designer in training is an entry-level position, and you would help us apply engineering fundamentals to the design of our basic electrical systems. That's what we would expect you to do. And some of the typical duties coming in as an entry-level designer in training, we really would want you to be proficient in the use of the computer-aided design tools, and at this point, from a drafting perspective. So being familiar and proficient with, we still use the AutoCAD MEP, and we're also migrating quickly to Revit. So skill set in Revit, skill set in MEP, or skill set in both, all of those would be considered as part of an entry-level person. Some of the routine duties that we'd ask someone to perform, well, our basic branch circuiting. I mean, that's fundamentally kind of where it all starts, is laying out a room, putting in some devices, trying to identify the circuiting back for a control perspective and back to a panel perspective. So some of the fundamentals would be things that we'd expect students initially. Now, we encourage you as entry level with the skills you've learned here at Dunwoody to try to help us in some of the fundamental and some of the basic design elements, and sitting down with some of the more senior designers in our firm as they try to help craft out what your task might be. We encourage you to kind of push the envelope, to come up with ideas, to come up with some potential solutions. And while we encourage that, what we do expect is that you ask questions when there's something that you just don't understand. Because in a consulting firm, that is probably our primary means of a training program, is the learning that you obtain through the course of your project involvement. So when you're asked to do something and it's something that you don't quite understand, having that more senior person explain it to you, or get someone else involved within the firm who has that experience, quite honestly, that's our best training offering that we have. So to a large degree, if you folks were to come to Mashad Cooley or most other design firms in town, you're sort of in control to a large degree of how fast you can learn, how fast you can advance, because you've got to be there asking the questions. And we expect our people to take the time to explain things. And if you don't understand, to get someone else involved that maybe the person giving you the information didn't quite have it completely understood. So we'll get other people involved. And just to say that to a large degree, that is how we kind of mentor, and really that's how we train our young staff, is on the job and through the course of the design process. So again, other tasks, inputting data. I mentioned the branch circuiting. We have computer programs to help us with the design, help us with the scheduling. As an entry-level person, you're going to be inputting the data. Others will be kind of checking your work, making sure that we're comfortable that we're getting the right data in so that we get the right information out. But that's part of the learning curve. We may look at some research, particularly with some of the basic components, maybe doing some, we maybe have somewhat of a unique need with some gear or generator size, and we may ask you to go ahead and do some investigation, online, checking various vendors for solutions for a particular need, or we do a lot of resourcing with the manufacturer's representatives. The manufacturer's representatives are extremely beneficial in kind of cutting to the chase. You can go through a website and you may have it, but sometimes there's so many options that it isn't quite clear. So oftentimes getting the manufacturer's rep, sit down, talk about the need, and they can zero in. They'll oftentimes go online themselves, do some high-level sketches based on their factory resources, and they'll print out, well, here's what we think, and bingo, you've got that vendor's idea of what the right solution for that need is. So those are tasks that we'll ask entry-level folks to kind of get started with and to kind of help us out. You want this in the background? So from a knowledge and experience perspective, no experience required. We're not expecting you young folks that we would hire out of Dunwoody, we're not expecting that you necessarily have experience. We have hired people who have had experience, and that's always a plus, and that's something that we would consider over the past number of years. Occasionally we'll have folks that have worked as electricians or in other electrical aspects of this industry that could help, and quite honestly then that may bring them in as they may still be a designer in training, but with their previous background they may accelerate at a much faster rate just because of years of other related experience. But basically for a designer in training, we're not looking for someone with experience. We are looking for someone with a 2-year technical degree. Years ago we had a category for a CAD drafter, and I think you'll still find it on the books at Mashad Cooley, but we in the electrical group, we've really, for the last 12 to 15 years, tried not to hire someone with just drafting skills. We can, not I, but people in our firm can teach CAD skills easier than we can teach the fundamentals of electric design. So we want minimally the 2-year technical degree here at Dunwoody, which will give you some basic CAD skills, basic electrical design knowledge, and that's what we look for to kind of start and fill our role at Mashad. I'm going to talk of a few of the other positions as we go through, and again, eventually we'll talk a little bit about project management, which was sort of the purpose of this talk. But I'll mention that at Mashad Cooley, and I've been at 34 years, and one of my philosophies, and it has held pretty strongly, is that we're a firm that tries to promote from within. And the designer in training role is the entry-level position. But if we lose someone at a position higher up as a project designer or senior designer, the first thing I'll do is, can we promote from within to fill that position? And it does a couple things. It gives people the realization that there is opportunity at Mashad Cooley, and we recognize that people want the opportunity to advance. And so when these opportunities exist, by moving from within, I think we've satisfied that need, and then it sometimes pushes folks to then advance at times more quickly, or at least gives them the opportunity to advance, within our firm. Now, will we never hire from the outside? No, that can't be the case. There's times we lose someone with a specific skill set, and we're not ready to cover that from within. And sure, we hire from outside occasionally, but we always look from within first to see if we can move people, and maybe rather than hiring a seasoned project designer, we make some adjustments, and what we do is we hire 2 designers in training. And so now we've kind of satisfied our needs, and we've given a couple new people some opportunity. So with that, our next role in the electrical and also mechanical, from a technical perspective, is a staff designer. And a staff designer is someone that has 2 years of experience. I think we mentioned that as minimum requirement. And they work with other designers, and they work on projects with project managers in a support design role. So some of the duties that a staff designer would perform is you're getting more involved with the calculations. Now, you've been introduced to this as a designer in training. But when we promote to a staff designer, there's sort of a meaning to that. It's not that you're a staff designer, now you'll start learning calculations. As I define the role of a staff designer, over that 2-year course of time as a designer in training, you're really learning these duties and responsibilities. So my expectation is, as I promote someone to a staff designer, they can proficiently do most of the duties identified, and they've been at least introduced to some that maybe they're not proficient at. So project managers, as they're staffing their projects and they're kind of looking at the available staff, they have an expectation of what you should be able to do. And maybe they haven't worked with you on their projects, they've heard of you, but they haven't really worked with you. But now that you're a staff designer, they have an expectation that you can do the basic calculations, you can do the lighting calcs, the basic power distribution calcs. You've been introduced uh, to those tasks, get involved with the equipment sizing. Of course, laying out the branch circuiting is something that you should be very proficient at. Getting involved with the electrical riser diagram as a staff designer. You should understand how an electrical riser diagram is put together, understand the incoming service and the main service equipment, and if there's any transformation needs, and kind of how that gets blocked out into chunks of power for your chiller power and some mechanical equipment up on the roof and some riser for lighting and small power on each floor as we go through. So you kind of understand the basics, and you can assist with putting together the fundamentals of an electrical riser diagram, and work with more seasoned designers, engineers, and project managers in the fine-tuning of that riser diagram. So that's an important part of what we end up doing. Clearly getting involved with equipment sizing. So now you may be involved in a project and understand the service size, understand that working with other members, but you may be the guy that has to kind of go find the equipment, size the room, make sure we have our code required clearances. That's an expectation of a staff designer. Getting more involved with research, helping to make the recommendations on equipment, bringing that information forward to other seasoned designers or project managers that you would work with. Shop drawing review, I don't know if you're probably familiar a little bit with the term shop drawing review, but if you specify light fixtures or switch gear, panel boards, transformers, the successful contractor will then, as they bid this out to the vendors, whatever they choose to submit, they'll get a shop drawing assembly that they send to us for our review and approval. So we'll look at the light fixtures, we'll look at the switch gear, transformer, we'll make sure that we're comfortable that it meets our specification and design documents. So as a staff designer, that'll be a responsibility that you will receive, and you'd be one looking more closely at those shop drawings and the details and making approvals of that. Getting involved with code research is very important. You may be the guy that gets to call the inspector on a project. We may have some unique situations that aren't quite crystal clear as to what we want to do. Maybe we want to do something that we know in other areas have been a little bit of the gray area of the code. We think it's okay, but we've had some inspectors rule against us, but it's the right thing to do. So you may call the inspector, introduce yourselves, the project, and talk about what we're doing, and try to get some confirmation from the inspector on an issue. So getting involved with code and dealing with the inspectors is an important task for the staff designer. And then obviously getting involved with the documentation, helping prepare the CAD drawings, working with some of our scheduling programs, significant part of those responsibilities of a staff designer. I mentioned that it was our guideline is a 2-year experience as a designer in training, and while we don't hold hard and fast to that, what we've sort of found is it usually takes about 2 years to be ready to be a staff designer. In some cases it takes more, and it may not be a reflection on the individual. It might be a reflection of the project nature of what they were involved with, and as part of the leadership team, we look out for that. If someone is involved in strictly doing the CAD layout of receptacles for 2 years, well, shame on us, because we want that 2-year period to give them a full exposure to the kinds of things that we would see as an entry-level designer training. And so we'd like to see people get a more full spectrum of experience. But at times that doesn't happen, and you may just not be ready. It may take a little bit more time to gain that overall skill set to be a a staff designer. So we've entry-level designer in training, and then at least a couple years as a staff designer. So the next step at Mashad would be promoted to a project designer. And the project designer is often serving in a role of what we call a project leader. Project leader is not a position. It's not a one of our levels of advancement as a project leader. Some firms call that type of a role a job captain. What it is it's someone sort of the right-hand person for your project manager that helps in the coordination of the project. And so someone who has attained the position of project designer, we feel is qualified with a lot of knowledge, a lot of design skill, a certain amount of obtained a certain amount of management skills to sort of help the project manager, and they could sort of be their right-hand person helping to pull a project together. So that's a role that a project designer could serve as. On a larger project, maybe one project designer might serve as the project leader, helping the PM, and then other project designers would have their responsibility on the project. And there's some, in terms of the kinds of things they do, there's some overlap to all the things I've discussed as a staff designer. However, the project designer can carry these design concepts usually right to completion, and then would have more of an interface with a senior designer, or more of an interface with the project manager, more of a reporting of what has been done, maybe more of a sit down on a QC, quality control basis with your project manager. But the project designer is very knowledgeable and very capable person. So just kind of not to minimize these things, but again, complete responsibility for laying out electrical rooms and defining all those requirements, putting together some task lists. Our project designer may have staff designers and designers in training, essentially sort of reporting to them for the day-to-day activity. And so while the PM is responsible overall for this project and maybe a number of other projects, the PM sort of works with their project designer folks and use them to help with the overall development and management of that project. So the project designer may, kind of on the front line, sit down with a designer in training and staff designer and say, okay, I'm going to have you help me do some investigation for this electrical room, and I need it by Wednesday, and it should be about a day and a half task, just to kind of help us have a sense of controlling our internal budgets. We can kind of get that, sometimes we get that help through the project designer level, and they will help with that. Project designer could help put together a complete conceptual design for a schematic design phase. So again, the project manager would sit and do the things they do, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then communicate that through their project designer, who then would help pull together some initial concept drawings and for schematic designs or design developments, or helping with the contract documents. Obviously, the project designer, as a seasoned person, could get involved with the detail coordination. They may pick what details we want in the project and then work with the staff designer and designers in training to help refine them. But there's certain things that we may or may not want to have in our projects that we think are necessary to get the level of quality or the completeness that we're looking for. Documenting existing conditions. At this level, our project designer level is usually the one that has enough knowledge, enough experience that if we're doing some major serious remodeling on a facility, they could come in with their clipboard and information and digital cameras now and do a very detailed assessment of the existing system. So they would go through the main switch gear, they'd identify the sizing, the fault current, the style of breakers, or their fuses, whatever it might be. And they could do a very concise documentation if we're going to come back in and do some major renovation to that project. It's usually someone at a project designer level that we need to go through and do those building assessments and documentation of that information. I talk about editing specifications, and clearly someone at a project designer level would work with the project manager and have a lot of involvement with our specification book. And not only from an editing perspective, but they may be responsible to really create specs at times if there's a section that we just need to develop. That person would have the level of experience to help us with all that technical spec writing and development of the spec. We also do have a master spec that we try to draw from on projects. We try to keep the master spec current, and the person at a project designer level is oftentimes asked to help us with the research and the task of updating our master specs. And as time flies by, it's surprising how things change. I think we recently realized that a number of our vendors in our medium voltage cable spec no longer exist. So they get bought by someone and they change their name, and then someone else buys another cable manufacturer, and so they have a name change. And before you know it, we still have some names in our spec that they don't exist. So we got to look out for those sorts of things, and project designers can often help us. Other responsibilities, on-site inspections, on-site reports. Some of our major projects, especially in the Twin City region area, we may have responsibility of doing periodic reviews. So a project designer has that skill set to go out and go to the construction meetings, walk the site, come back, write a crisp observation report so that we're documenting some of the progress, some of the issues that have come up, and some of the things that might get resolved. And if there's an issue that needs to be contractually changed as opposed to just a field report, project designer may initiate a proposal request to the contractor that then they would respond to. Yes, we can make this change you're talking about for these dollars, and then that may have to get added to contracts to the project through a change order. The project designer helps manage and helps with that whole process of project reports and issues. I talk about the final punch list. So when we get to the point where the project is complete, in addition to these periodic site inspections, at the end of the project, we would perform a final inspection, or we tend to call it a punch list. And we'll go through room by room, literally outlet by outlet, and looking for problems. If there's a big crack in that lens, that's an easy one to see. If the receptacle's twisted, that's an easy one to see. But we try to go even beyond that to make sure that the infrastructure is what we had called for, and the installation of the equipment is what we might expect. So it's a project designer who often does the punch list for us on our projects. I already kind of mentioned addendums and code research. Opinion of probable cost, and I kind of opened with that early on, that we really don't do detailed estimates. And our lawyers have said if we even mention cost, it's got to be identified as an opinion of probable cost. So we don't do cost estimates. We'll give you our opinion of the probable cost, but don't hold us to it, because we don't know. We have no idea what the cost will be from a legal standpoint, and I guess that keeps us out of trouble. However, having said that, you may get involved helping put some numbers together. I mentioned the RS means. Probably some of our more detailed costing comes in when we have a request or a RFI, request for information, or an RFP, request for proposal, or we issue a might call it a bulletin or something. It's a project change, and it might be that we missed something. It might be that it's a field condition that something has to change, and depending on how the contractor is doing, that response might be within a range of what we think is fair. But if they're not doing very well, they're going to push the envelope as hard as they can, and it's going to be much higher. And so occasionally we'll get involved looking at a response to potential change, and we're going, this just doesn't seem right. So we'll maybe dissect it using the means catalog, means numbers, and dissect it as close as we can. And like I said, if I use the RS means to bid a job, I'd never get one. But if I use the RS means to validate a change order cost, I'm always low. But that's okay. I mean, that's just the way this industry is. And if something came in after the fact, it obviously costs the contractor more money, and you have to expect that. But we just like to make sure it's within reason. So we may be doing some cost evaluation of a contractor's change order price to say, we didn't see it as this much. So here's what we think. Let's sit down and find out where the big differences are. And sometimes we find it, and sometimes we don't. But that's an area that you could get involved with as a project designer. Value engineering is a term in our industry that we hear a lot. Not sure why it got named value engineering. It seems like sometimes the value goes down, but that's a term we'll hear all the time. And on our negotiated projects, it's fine. We come up with a concept, work with our contractors. If there's a negotiated job, they're on board early, they're part of the big team. They put together numbers, and everybody looks at the numbers and realize that it's 30% more than the owner's budget. So, okay, now we have to value engineer to provide hopefully the same level of a project within the owner's budget. And that can be tough. And we have to come up with the ideas too. We just don't sit on our hands and wait for the contractors to value engineer our work. We have to also offer ideas of, okay, this is what we were trying to do for these reasons, that had this outcome. Okay, how can we get to that outcome? That's what the owner needed at a lower cost. Well, okay, maybe we may come up with another solution that hopefully gives the same outcome. So we'll put that on the table. Our contractor partner may just give us a different solution that costs less, which is fair to challenge us, but they weren't at the meetings where we identified the owner's need. So we have to balance just saving money for the sake of saving money versus value engineering. I suppose that's where the value comes in. Reducing the cost, but still achieving the objective the owners had as part of our schematic design meetings. So, all these things are on the table. They're all, candidates for consideration, but at the end of the day, we've got to meet their needs, and we have to meet their budget. So that's a difficult process, and the project designer, has the knowledge and experience to help participate in that, and we'd expect that to be one of their responsibilities. I say getting more involved with review and documentation. And the thing I've found interesting is that with the advent of CAD drafting and then CAD as a design tool, MEP and Revit, it's difficult to identify, when are you drafting or when are you designing or when are you doing quality control, because whether you're a designer in training, staff designer, or a project designer, you're probably sitting behind the computer with the drawing up in front of you, and you could be doing any of those tasks. And so, with the advent of this electronic age, you could be doing your quality control review looking right at the drawing, and rather than what I might have done 30 years ago is looked at red line. You mentioned red lines, and I used to do detailed red lines, but now someone in a QC role would be reviewing what they had talked about as some of the objectives, looking at the work done by maybe your staff designer, and if you see something that you don't quite agree with or you think needs to be tweaked, you're probably making those changes. Now, if it was a mistake, I expect you to communicate that to the staff designer and say, look, you either didn't quite understand what I was saying, maybe it's my fault, or maybe you didn't really know exactly what to do in this case. So a chance to sit down and have some education and just make sure that person does understand what we might have assumed that they would understand at that point. But at the same time, project designer in there doing some quality control review can do an awful lot of changing directly onto the document. And so are they doing QC work? Are they doing design work? Are they doing drafting work? It all becomes integrated at some point. And that's part of our process these days. I already had mentioned in the role of a project leader, and again, that sort of serves as a backup, not a backup so much as more of a quarterback, if you will, to the project manager, kind of helping to handle the day-to-day activities. We put together various spreadsheets for engineering analysis, and those would be your role. A lot of editing of different documents that we have. So our kind of guideline would be a minimum of 8 years experience to be considered as a project designer. So if you started with us, you might have 2 as a designer in training, 2 as a staff designer, so another 4 as a project designer. That's sort of our guideline before we'd say, might you be ready to move on to our next position, which is a and at Machad, this is we've done this intentionally. The role of the project designer can take 2 paths. And what we've tried not to do is just say that you have to be a project manager to have a top position at Machad Cooley Erickson. That's the only way you're going to have a top position. So we've created a senior designer, senior engineer position. And if you look at our org chart, designer in training and the staff designer and the project designer, it's kind of like 2 paths. You can be a senior designer or you can be a project manager. And the idea was there are people that deserve to have a top position at Machad Cooley Erickson that really should not be put in a position where 90% of their day in, day out activity is management. You know, they're excellent in their engineering, excellent in their design knowledge. They love doing the design. They love doing the engineering. And they've gotten themselves to a point where they're a kind of an in-house expert, maybe an in-house expert in power and distribution, in-house expert in other aspects. And to saddle them to say, well, the only way you're going to achieve within our company is to be a project manager, that doesn't do them any good, and it doesn't do the company any good. So we've created a senior designer role that gives a person the opportunity to maintain their engineering skills and to do the things that they really enjoy doing, which is solving engineering problems. And they may work with multiple project managers and kind of help with all of the tough design issues that might come with certain sorts of projects. And as such, we recognize these people in their role, and we recognize the importance that they bring to the company. And we believe that we treat them fairly in terms of the financial compensation, and we've not forced them to be a project manager. So their opportunities, if there happens to be bonus money, their access to their fair share of bonus money is in the same range as the project manager, because they provide that much value to the company, even though they're not the project manager. So having said that, our senior designer basically does many of the things, and all of the things that I talked about, so I'm not going to go through them all again from a project designer perspective. It's just that they've become experts and they've kind of dedicated their career to stay in a technical role and to provide a high level of expertise to all of our projects that might need that high level of expertise. So again, they oftentimes would get involved with the tough studies of a situation or detailed reports that have a engineering based issue involved. They're not just involved with writing papers to write papers, but it's a very technical issue, very technical design assessment that requires someone with that level of expertise to put it together. And these are the people that we rely on for those needs. Our guideline is somebody with 12 years of previous design experience. So a person would have worked as a project designer for quite some time, along with the 4 years previous, to then be recognized, if that's the path they chose, as a senior designer. And in our firm, we have what we call group leaders, and a group leader may have 5 to 6 staff members that report to the group leader. And it's the group leader's role to talk on at least an annual basis, because there's a required annual review, but hopefully we talk more than once a year. But the group leader then is to work with the individuals within their group, A, to communicate company information as necessary, but B, to really be looking out for that person's career. So if that person needs some type of project experience, a group leader would help them achieve that. But kind of related to the senior designer, I've had a number of folks that have come through that I've been involved with that we kind of talk about the end game in terms of project management versus senior designer. And I've never really said, nah, you're a senior designer, no, you're a project manager. But through the course of having these conversations year in, year out, by the time we get to making that decision, usually that person has made it. And that person has said, no, I really want to get into project management. I really want to deal with people. I really want to deal with budgets and schedules and contracts. And that's me. Or they recognize, you know, given my opportunities, I'm always doing engineering. This is what I really, really want to do. Why would I want to be a project manager and give much of this up? So they typically make that decision before it gets to the point that I have to say, well, if it's up to me, I'd send you this way. But they oftentimes kind of pick that course themselves, and it usually works out pretty well. So, came here to talk about project management, but I thought, I don't know, it didn't seem not to just to stand here and talk about our project managers without sort of giving an idea that, hey, it takes a little time to get there. And B is at least 10 years of work with us before you be a project manager. But along the way, you will have opportunity to use your management skills. You'll have the opportunity to lead a design in project meetings with the client, with other team members. You'll have a chance to stand up in front of them and, you know, pin your drawings on the wall and do a wall review or a presentation. You'll have those opportunities along the way. But at Mashad, to actually be designated as a project manager, it could take, well, we're recommending at least 10 years. And we probably place more responsibility on our project managers and a greater expectation than maybe other firms do, and which is maybe why it takes longer. But our project managers have more of a focus on those management tasks. And let's kind of walk through that. Our project manager is responsible for the overall supervision of those projects assigned to them, and they oversee the entire design process and assure that the project conforms to the contractual agreements the firm has made and that the project is completed within the allocated period of time and within budget. So we have that expectation of our project managers to bring the projects in and to provide the design on schedule and within our budget. And I wish it always worked out that way, but it has to work out enough so that we continue to stay in business. And we've been fortunate; we're still in business. So, what are the duties of the project manager? Well, as I've stated that they receive project assignments from the principals, and while that's true, that's not always how it comes in. But oftentimes, our principals, the owners of the firm, have been sort of our frontline marketers, if you will, for new project work, because everyone else is busy. And so that's sort of their responsibility, is to make new contacts and to follow new leads and try to put together the presentation for a interview, if you will. So the principals sort of frontline that. Now they bring in project management and senior designers and project designers oftentimes as part of an interview process if we have to show our team. But the principals tend to take the first step and frontline for new work, new leads, new proposals. And at some point that gets assigned to a project manager. You've got the job, it's yours. Let's get her done and get it done on time and get it done on budget. And so now the project manager has it. Again, here they've probably already have participated in the proposal. They've already participated in the client presentation, and they've helped with the final contract agreement, and now they have to manage it. So they would be the primary person to develop a kind of a task listing. So we have schematic phase, design development phase, contract document phase, bidding phase, construction phase. So we're going to take that fee and kind of translate that into available hours. And we may have for schematic phase, and we may have it down to a specific designer, or we just may say lighting designer, power designer, systems designer, X hours in schematic phase, Y hours in DD. So they've got to kind of break this thing into a manageable schedule of hours and time that we can get this thing done on budget. Now, once they maybe have crafted an overview, they'll work with their project designers and say, hey, look, here's the team of the lighting and power and low voltage systems folks that need to help put this together. Here's what we have budgeted for this phase. I need you to orchestrate this as the project designer. We'll meet weekly to talk about progress and what issues are. But the PM has overall responsibility for that. They need to develop the budget schedules, as I've mentioned, the selection of the team, overall assignment of the tasks, questions and issues that come up on a daily basis. Oftentimes on a bigger job, they would go to a project designer who is assigned as a project leader, someone to help the PM. But oftentimes it starts there, and then the group walks into the PM's office and says, we have some issues, and so then they kind of reiterate the issues, and the project manager, if they can answer it, they'll answer it, or they may say, okay, we go back and check these 3 things out, and let's talk again, because we just don't have enough information at this point. But they're ultimately responsible for those decisions. They're responsible for the accuracy and quality of the work, but we use other team members. We'll use our senior people to do quality control. We use our project designers to help with quality control, but the project manager should also be going through and reviewing documents and some of the details to make sure that we're putting out a quality product. And monitoring, obviously, the budget schedules, looking at the invoices for the progression of the work. Oftentimes we see the monthly request for payment from the contractors, and so we may have to sign off on that, and the PM's responsibility for that. They probably use their project designer who's on the front line and may know more. The contractor said he must get paid for all the switchgear that's in place. Well, they say, well, it's sitting in this big empty room, but it's not in place yet. So we may have noted that it's not in place. They say, well, wait a minute, it's not in place yet. Why are you claiming that? And, oh, well, we got ahead of ourselves. Never mind. But that typically doesn't happen. But things can happen that need to be observed through our reviews. Again, past due accounts is one of the ugly parts of project management, and as a big firm, we get a monthly report of clients that owe us money, and the project manager has the responsibility to politely call your client and ask if there's any chance that we're going to get paid, and that's part of project management. Is not just the development of the project, it's the follow-up, it's issues with the payment and issues with contract. Working with your team on issues that might develop. I say develop technical competence, and while it starts with the project manager, I think my comment earlier on is even more important. I think working with the mentor that you might be assigned with is really really where it works for our firm. And typically we would have people working very closely with someone who is sort of at that next tier with you. So if you're a designer in training, you'd be doing a lot of work with staff designer, possibly project designer. But those folks have recently been through, your level of experience, and we think they can kind of relate to that, and they're there to answer your questions and to kind of transfer the knowledge that they've gained onto you. It is the PM's responsibility to help make that happen, and I think the PMs in our firm will also take time whenever they can, and when given that opportunity, to sit and answer the questions and to help share some of the knowledge that we have. But it starts with the PM, but it's really up and down the lines within our firm making that happen. Maintaining client contact is extremely important. While the principals might be the frontline marketers for new opportunities, chasing the leads in some of the industry documents that come out, most of our work comes from repeat client work. And the only way we maintain repeat client work is to do the job right, on time, on budget. But it's the maintaining that relationship with our project managers and some of our senior designers, and even some of our more senior project managers. So, but particularly at the project management level, maintaining that relationship with our ongoing clients is extremely important. So if we finished a project this year and we've done their work for the last 10 years, when their next project comes, we're hoping that we get the phone call. They're thinking about doing this building. What do you think? It's on our campus. Do we have enough service capacity? Do we have enough generation? Do we have, how will it work? And we're right there helping them front end issues that might come up. We'll say, well, let's look out for this and this and this that might really drive the cost, or and oftentimes that front end work is just an assist to them, just a few hours of high level feedback. And then when it gets to be a more serious project, again, hopefully we get the call. And we don't always get our long-term client work handed to us. We all would love that, all of us in the design world. But if we've done the job right and we maintain a good relationship, if we even have to compete, I think it gives us a leg up to maintain that relationship. So that's an expectation of the project managers, to help maintain those client relationships and make sure that if there's an issue, we're on it, we resolve it, and we move forward. So again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the PM work. Our guideline is about 10 years, so it appears to be easier to be a project manager at Michaud than a senior designer. Why we chose that, I've forgotten, but both are very important roles. Both are senior roles within Michaud Cooley-Erickson. The project management has that management level of responsibility, and a large share of their work is dedicated to the management. Now, we have different ways of solving that at Michaud Cooley. I've probably been involved on many of the larger projects, and we have multiple larger projects occurring at the same time, and so percentage of management issues is much higher, as opposed to others. They carry the project management responsibility, but they're not really tuned to have multiple projects or multiple large projects, and so they have the time and the desire to kind of do the project management and the senior designer role. So we will still fine-tune how a person works at Michaud, even though we have these real clear career paths. Depending on how a person best works, we modify things to adjust. So we have folks that are more inclined to do a project, and they'll be the project manager, but they're probably 50% project manager, 50% senior designer on a given project. And so there's different variations to how we operate. So that gave you a high level of life at Michaud Cooley, coming in as a designer in training and eventually working up to a senior designer role or a project manager role. I guess at this point, if you've got any questions, I'll try to entertain, I'll try to answer them, but so I'm open to questions.
Approximately how many PMs staff?
I should know that exactly. Electrically, I'm thinking 8. Mechanically, maybe 9 or 10. Now, we're a firm 128 people, and which we've grown back in 2008 before the economy crashed. We were 125 people. We were affected. We held in for about a year, but then we were affected. We dropped down to about 106 in staff. Now we've grown back to 128. So we are bigger than we have ever been. But it's not happy days are here again quite yet. The economy's been fighting its way back. But back in 2007, 2008, we had multiple projects that were in the 80 to 100 million dollar in construction cost size out there in design. We don't have anything close to that size of project. And so we're dealing with much smaller projects, and we could be more selective back when our plate was full with the kind of projects we like. We're a big company, we like to do big projects. And we like to do ongoing work with big clients, whether their project is big or small. So we'll do, we do a lot of small projects, but when we're doing small projects, we want to be part of General Mills or, part of Medtronic or part of a big client that we'd like to do much of their work for. But we still find ourselves scrapping for a small project just to have the small project, which isn't what we enjoy, but we still have to keep the work flowing. And I think we're to a point where we can be a little bit selective. We don't have to go after everything that gets out there, but we'd like to be more selective because I think we're a niche company, and our niche is big jobs. And while we're big, and there's been some sectors that have grown within our firm more, our Mac work has grown tremendously. Our Target store work continues to grow. Our healthcare work has been soft, and our data center work has been okay, but we think that's going to grow more. Corporate office work has been actually relatively strong of late. So we're fairly diverse, but and we think things have been struggling to improve, but we're not quite there. So that's the number of project managers we have. We're probably sitting okay for the moment with project managers, but opportunities will continue, as we continue to grow and time moves on. Other questions?
You guys work on residential projects?
Which one?
Residential projects.
Boy, we try not to. The only residential project we've worked on, and we have had involvement over the last 30 years with some of these residential high-rises in town. So if it's a big residential high-rise type thing where there's more M&E infrastructure involved, we'd likely get involved. We don't get involved with residential homes other than if it's a large contractor building himself a very nice home and he wants our lighting design team to help him with lighting for there. We'll help him with the lighting design. And so lighting design might get involved a little bit with residential, more so than our mechanical electrical team. And it's often because it's a person's house, it's a very nice house, and our involvement might be almost more marketing than a design commission. So, but residential hasn't been good for us, and residential churches, we avoid churches. It's tough work, and occasionally one of our partners or somebody's on a committee, and sort of then we're usually better just giving them some conceptual ideas for free, so we can step away. It's a church. I've been on some of these design teams years ago on a church, and it's like a committee of 20 people every meeting. Everything changes from week to week. Church design is really tough. Let those that kind of specialize in church design, they seem to be able to do it, but we haven't been able to do churches. Same with K through 12 schools. We just can't get into that world. There's designers out there that they focus on K-12, and they've got it down. And it's probably like us doing Target stores. We got it down, but we've never gotten the K-12 schools down. So we stay away from that market too. But otherwise, we're fairly diverse in commercial, large office type work, hospital work, data center work. Uh, the well, the project you're doing right now, our medical manufacturing, has been a strong one for us, and we try to stay focused on that. The Medtronics, the Boston Scientifics, Coloplast, St. Jude Medical. There's a lot of good firms in Minnesota that do a lot of high-tech buildings that have medical manufacturing and research. We stay in that market very strong. Yes, sir.
How much work is done like out in Minnesota and where the major hurdles being
Well, the major hurdles probably they're not familiar with us, so it's kind of introducing yourselves. We and registration. We're registered in all 50 states, also the District of Columbia and maybe Puerto Rico. So we have the registration covered, and we did that because we follow clients across the country, and this goes way back 35 years ago when we were doing 100 to 120 B. Dalton bookstores a year. I don't know if you even remember B. Dalton bookstores, but they were everywhere, and so we had to be registered everywhere to be able to crank out a B. Dalton bookstore. Started with that, and then we did a lot of other small box, we called it small box retail over the years. Williams, Sonoma, we were doing their stores all across the country. There's a ton of them that we've done over the years. And then we got into firstly Walmart, and then when Sam, whatever, Walton, whatever his last name was, when he died, we had about 20 people doing Walmart stores, and when he died, this was probably 20 years ago, they turned off the switch. Everything stopped right in its track. And so we had 20 people that we were carrying for about 6-7 months expecting it to come back. And what happened is we didn't know the people that took over. So the people that took over, going back to relationships, they had different relationships than us. And the people that we had relationships with ended up on the outs. So Walmart came back and continued to design and build stores, but we had nothing to do with it. So that was tough. We did have a team, and we migrated into, there's an opportunity to migrate into Target. So we probably have a team probably bigger than that at this point doing Target stores. Again, we follow Target all across the country. So our national work, for the most part, follows a client. We've had large jobs following the client. Wells Fargo, we did a design for a $120 million data center in Chandler, Arizona. But we didn't go down there and market Arizona. We followed our client to a project in Arizona. We did a big data center for U.S. Bank in Kansas. Years ago, we built a lot of printing plants for Deluxe Check, which most of them are now closed. They had about 60 across the country. Again, we followed Deluxe Check across the country. So I guess the challenge for us would be more of a challenge if we decided we're going to set up a small firm in Phoenix and we're going to go after the Phoenix market. That'd be tough because we're an unknown for the market in Phoenix. There's already good engineers, good contractors, good folks that can provide service. Why would they consider us? So we're not marketing across the country. We tend to follow our clients that we work with across the country. That's been a pretty good formula for us. Question? That's it? Good? Okay. Well, good luck on the completion of the project and the course. It'd be good to see what you've all come up with.
Any question for Guy, guys? Anything about the projects, the design? I mean, we're doing behind you is photos for window, and that's
Okay.
probably your senior engineers and they do it right now. Okay, I was surprised to see Nick Brenner doing it. That was really nice.
Oh yeah,
I think Nick Brenner, right?
Nick. Yeah.
Nick Brenner. Yeah, that was good.
Well, and I can't say this about all consulting firms, and you may want to, investigate as part of your career choices. At Mashad Cooley, a lot of our people, I came from Anoka Tech, and Mike Plummetal came from Anoka Tech, so we have two, on the electrical side, the two principals in the firm have technical degrees. Now, I also attained registration in 33 states, but I'm not registered in Minnesota because that would have taken a 4-year degree. So think about that. The careers that are available with a 2-year technical degree at our firm, it's not a lot of distinction, not to discount the double E because it's extremely important, but you've already made a decision to move into a technical role and to enjoy the things and the opportunities that exist through the technical role. And there's firms like Mashad Cooley that will let you push that as far as you are able to push it. So the only thing that's going to limit what you can do at Mashad Cooley is your capability or your willingness to learn or your, the time available to learn and to advance yourself. So we don't hold back people based on their training and background. I mean, that gives you your first start in this industry. And a 4-year degree is a different first start than a 2-year degree, no doubt. But we have 2-year degree people that can achieve whatever they want to achieve at Mashad Cooley. Now, that doesn't mean you can, you can't sign drawings with a 2-year degree, and we may never ask you to sign drawings. That's probably something you don't have to worry about. But you could move into a senior designer role, or you could move into a project manager role, and we have people that will be the engineer of record as senior people for any project that we send out. So we have project managers who are not the engineer of record, and the engineer of record has the engineer of record responsibility, which is unique, and that person we would always involve in the QC process along the way. So our engineer of record may look at the details more closely than I might, because I'm the project manager, but Todd Daly might be signing that drawing because it's Minnesota and I'm not registered in Minnesota. So Todd Daly's signing that drawing. He's a guy who's going to look at it in more detail. Now, I have 33 registrations, so a lot of target stores I look at more closely because I'm the engineer of record. So that's an important role. But again, looking at your career choices, some firms let the person develop into whatever they can develop into. And I think Mashad Cooley, we've been very good about that. I think I have a sense that other firms have a more distinction, and there's perhaps, think about that, they might be, the opportunity may be more difficult to achieve. So, whether you find yourself in that position, think about long term, who are the project managers? 100% are double E's. Over here, it's 50-50. I want to be a project manager. I think I've got the skill set and capabilities. Maybe you got to make a change along the way. And we're not unique. I think there's other firms like us, and there's other firms like the style I've mentioned. So it's just something to think about. But there's opportunity for someone with the 2-year technical degree. We're one of those firms that the only limit is yourselves. Now, if you want to, in 10 years, branch out on your own and start your own engineering shop in Minnesota and sign drawings, then through those 10 years, you're going to need to go back and fill in the double. But not everybody wants to do that in 10 years. And you can have an excellent career with excellent compensation and challenging opportunities short of doing that. And that isn't for everybody. So kind of be at peace with what you want out of this career and make the best of it. It can be a great career.
Any other questions, guys? Comments?
Do you have any support, educational support for this?
For yes and no. Yes. If we'll send people to seminars. We may send them to local events. We provide the time. We'll likely pay for a fee for registration to attend certain events that would benefit that person, which we feel also benefits the company. We may ask that person to come back and do a little brown bag. So we bring the group together and they have to talk about the things that they learned at this event, kind of share the information to either the whole team or parts of our engineering team. On the other hand, when I mentioned if in 10 years you want to be a double E, and so in the next 10 years you're going to go to night school and online, whatever it takes to get that double E, well, that's probably benefiting yourself first, and which in the end could make you more valuable to the company. But we don't pay for ongoing schooling if you're going back to get that double E, or if you're going to go back to get a art major, whatever you might want to do while you're working. We don't pay for the ongoing college education. That's something that you're going to benefit frontline. You know, if you do that over the next 10 years, and people do that, what we'll find is at some point they've achieved this and they've got their registration perhaps. And if they feel they're more valuable than what we're able to compensate, they'll let us know that one way or another. And if we believe they're more valuable than what we've been able to compensate, we'll react accordingly. But at that point, you know, that's something that the person has done for themselves first. At least that's our feeling. And I think consulting firms like ours are probably mostly similar. I think years ago, 3M was a firm that didn't matter what you went to school for, they paid. You know, they had a strong reimbursement plan, but most would consider that an investment that you are making in yourself first.
Guys, since Dave Carsey was not here,
Yeah.
and 50% of the students right now are working for electrical contractors. So I don't know if you want to say a few things, just if I know your time is almost out, but
That's
if
okay.
you want to say a few things about the contracting part of business, at least your view of that, since half of the class are already working in that part maybe. And they always say that what I get the feedback is we don't want to sit in a cubicle, we want to sit in the
Yeah.
field, and I don't know if you
Yeah.
wanna-
Well, I think there's similarities in what we do, whether you're working for a contractor, whether you're working for a consulting firm. But there's a different perspective. And I think today the contractors and the consultants are more friendly than 30 years ago. I mean, 30 years ago, there was more adversarial role, and it was almost by design where the engineers were the engineers and the contractors were, you know, we had an adversarial perspective. There was almost this sense that we have to challenge each other and protect one another from each other. That's gone, I think. We're all professionals, and I don't have any problem. I have great friends in the contracting field, and I have great relationships with contractors. And I mentioned, if I want estimating information, I'll call one of my contractor friends and, you know, maybe grab lunch and say, this is what we're thinking. Give me an idea from your take where you think this is going to be cost-wise. But from your career role perspective, it could go different ways in a contracting firm versus an engineering firm. I would imagine in a contracting firm, you're starting off maybe helping with takeoffs, maybe starting off helping with, I think the contractors call them install drawings, a lot of the contractors do, and we look at it where in the old days we used to draw all the squiggly lines for the branch circuits, and now we don't. We just kind of give a circuit diagram and we identify what circuit we want the devices on, but we don't do all the squiggly lines. Well, a lot of contractors have folks, you know, coming in as an entry-level person. Their foreman may sit down and take our drawings, and it's almost like they complete it. It's like they do the dot to dot, and they put in the half-inch with 3 number 12s and here in each special boxes, and they may dimension things. They add a ton of information that their internal design team spends a lot of time preparing almost installation drawings based on our drawings. And from their perspective, it saves them a lot of money because they're not out there with their journeyman and their apprentice and whatnot, foreman, making all these field decisions, looking at our drawing and, okay, let's see, I think that'll be a 3/4, let me do the math, and they have drawings that show exactly the conduit from A to B and B to C with exactly what's in it. If it's a special size box, all boxes are X unless if it's, I want a bigger box here. In the field, you can push what your apprentices can do because they don't have to figure it out. It's already been pre-figured out. So the guys in the shop, probably the foreman will sit down with you folks in the design field and kind of add a lot of detail, a lot of information to our CAD drawings, print it out, send it to the field, and it saves the contractors a lot of labor time. So I think that's a good thing. I don't have any problem with that. It's a level of detail that we can't afford to do because we're competing from a design perspective on the whole project, of which we're kind of focused on maybe the bigger picture, the main things, and we've given the information to get it built, but we haven't done the nuts and bolts that the contractors like to add. So that's an aspect of the work that you probably start doing. So you probably carry it a little further than our designers would. You might get more involved with estimating than our designers would. We're not relying on our team to do as much estimating as a contractor relies on their team. So even most of the designers, what I've seen, tend to also get experience in estimating. And if you find yourself to be an excellent estimator, you're probably going to be an estimator because the contractor needs excellent estimators to bid these jobs and to bid them right and to get it with the right overhead, right margins. And they're always looking for top-notch folks that do estimating. And people like to do estimating. So that's not, no suggestion it's a bad thing. It's just something that is an opportunity with a contractor shop to focus on estimating. And then contractors, while we work together, they're still our competition. They can be our competition or we can be their ally, but there's design build work that the contractors are competing for, and they may choose to do it in-house. And so you'll be doing design work similar to what we would have done had we done the project, but through the contractor, you may approach it a little bit differently. You're right out of this box, you're probably drawing more of the detail that's benefiting the field guys more so than we might have. On the other hand, we're not always competitors. There's been many projects where some of the bigger projects, some of the more complex projects on a design build basis, we've been hired by the contractors, the Hunts, the Parsons, ERCs, others, Egan, to be the designer. So we're the engineer of record. We do the design, but yet they have access to our CAD plans, and at some point, their internal design staff may provide that level of detail if they want to get to the field. So we work together and we compete. The one thing that I hear, and maybe this is a little bit what you alluded to, is if you want to be a project manager, I think there's a sense you're going to be a project manager right out of the box for a contractor, and boy, that's sure not the case. Now, you may have the title of project manager sooner than as I described, and with some of the things that I discussed from a shop crew's perspective, but a few years at a contractor shop, maybe you'll be, well, it goes back probably 30 years ago at Mashad Cooley. Almost everybody was a project manager. We kind of went through this thing where everybody wanted to be a project manager. So we had small job project managers, medium-sized job project managers, and large job project managers. It really didn't work, but someone who could come in and do that B. Dalton bookstore completely, they were a small job project manager. Well, in terms of project management expectation and responsibilities in the firm, they had a lot to learn. So we've kind of abandoned that, and we have a different expectation to be called a project manager. But we're seeing, from a contractor's perspective, some young kids out there sometimes showing up as the project manager. And it's usually a smaller job, and good for them. Maybe they can push it, but they also probably have a long ways to go and a lot to learn. To go to my next job that has the same shop that has a more seasoned project manager, with the skills that they've acquired. But I'd be a little careful about what my expectation is. You can be a project manager either way, contractor shop or a design shop. Our designers, long before the project managers, we get out to the job sites. Our designers are the ones that attend most of the meetings. As on these weeklies, especially as it gets into the construction phase, we'd send the project designer to the weekly meetings. Typically, the project manager may only show up if there's a known issue that may come up that needs some sort of decision made at that meeting. So our design team gets to the job site, you know, I think no differently than someone from a contractor shop. So while there's differences, I think there's a lot of overlap in those two career paths.
Any questions, guys? Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Good luck.